He left America at 24 because he believed, with the specific clarity of a person who has tested the hypothesis carefully, that if he stayed, he would die. Not metaphorically, not the death of the spirit, the death of ambition, the death of the self that cannot find its reflection in the world around it, though all of those too. The literal death. The black man in mid-century America who was too visible, too vocal, too completely unwilling to perform the careful diminishment that survival sometimes required. He went to Paris, lived in cheap hotels, finished the novel he had been unable to finish in New York, Go Tell It on the Mountain, the book that made him, published in 1953, and then kept writing, kept looking, kept doing the thing that was, from the beginning, the whole of his project, seeing clearly, speaking what he saw, refusing at every point, in every essay and novel and interview and public argument, to soften the image for the comfort of the audience receiving it. And then, in 1957, he came back. Not because it was safe, because Emmett Till had been murdered 2 years earlier, and the Montgomery bus boycott had happened, and the civil rights movement was beginning, and Baldwin understood, with the particular, sharp moral intelligence that was his most distinctive quality, that the writer who stayed in Paris while his country was deciding what it was going to be was not a writer any longer. He came back, to the country that had tried to kill him, to the country he had left because staying felt like a choice between his life and his sanity, to the country he had written about from Paris with the specific, detailed, completely unsparing love of a person who can only see the thing they love by standing at sufficient distance from it. He came back because love, in James Baldwin's understanding, real love, adult love, the love that is worth anything, is not the feeling that makes you comfortable. It is the commitment that makes you tell the truth. We live in a country that has never fully decided what to do with the people who see it clearly, who love it enough, who are committed enough to what it could be, what it has promised to be, what it sometimes, in its best moments, almost manages to be, to say plainly and without softening what it currently is and what it has been. The comfortable position is one of two, either the patriotism that does not look too closely, that celebrates without examining, that wraps itself in the flag as a substitute for the harder work of understanding what the flag has meant to the different people who have lived beneath it, or the rejection, the wholesale condemnation that is, in its own way, as unexamined as the patriotism, that declares the thing irredeemable and steps back from the project of trying to redeem it. Baldwin refused both. With the full force of the most precise moral intelligence the American 20th century produced, he refused the comfortable patriotism, refused it without apology, refused it in rooms full of people who wanted him to perform it, refused it on television when the host expected him to be grateful, refused it until the refusal itself became a form of love. And he refused the rejection, refused to walk away from the country, to write it off, to conclude that the gap between what America promised and what it delivered was unbridgeable and therefore not worth the cost of continuing to try to bridge it. He said, and this is the sentence I want to build this entire script around, because I think it is the most important thing James Baldwin ever wrote, and possibly the most important thing any American has written about what it means to love a country that is broken. Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. This is not optimism. It is not pessimism. It is the specific, precise, gentle, completely unsentimentalized position of a man who had been looking clearly at the thing for 40 years and had decided that the looking, however painful, however unlikely to produce the change it documented, was not optional. James Baldwin was born in Harlem in 1924, the oldest of 9 children. His stepfather, the only father he knew, was a preacher, a bitter and eventually unraveling man whose severity shaped Baldwin's childhood, and whose death Baldwin wrote about in one of the most devastating personal essays in the American language. Notes of a Native Son, published in 1955, the essay in which Baldwin describes his stepfather's funeral, held on Baldwin's 19th birthday, the same day Harlem erupted in the race riots of 1943, with a precision of feeling that does not flinch from a single truth: not the grief, not the rage, not the complicated love of a son for a father who made his childhood a kind of siege, not the specific, sad, American fury of a black man who has lived too long inside a system that has decided what he is before he has had the chance to decide for himself. He was a child preacher, had the gift, the voice, the timing, the ability to hold an audience inside language from the beginning. Left the church at 17 when he concluded that the faith he had been preaching was, in his specific case, a way of not looking at what he was not yet ready to face. He left Harlem, found his way to Greenwich Village, became a writer, or rather, revealed that he had always been a writer, had been one since the moment he understood that language was the instrument through which the seen thing could be made visible to someone who had not yet seen it. And then, the country made it clear, in the specific ways that mid-century America had for making things clear to black men who were too visible and too unwilling to be less so, that New York was not going to be enough of a distance from which to see it. He went to Paris, and from Paris he saw America, saw it whole, saw it in the way you can only see a thing when you are no longer standing inside it.
The Fire Next Time, published in 1963, the year of the March on Washington, the year that the Civil Rights Movement reached its most public and most dangerous crescendo, is the book that made Baldwin something more than a novelist or an essayist. It is two pieces. The first, a letter to his nephew, written on the 100th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation, is the most concentrated statement of love I have encountered in American letters. Not comfortable love, not the love that agrees and affirms and makes the beloved feel good about what they already are. The love that tells the truth, the love that says, here is what this country has done, and here is what it has told you that you are, and here is what you must not believe, and here is what I need you to understand about the people who have decided your worth before they have ever genuinely looked at you. He writes to his nephew, "You were born where you were born and faced the future that you faced because you were black and for no other reason. The limits of your ambition were thus expected to be set forever. You were born into a society which spelled out with brutal clarity and in as many ways as possible that you were a worthless human being. You were not expected to aspire to excellence. You were expected to make peace with mediocrity." And then, in the same letter, without transition, without the softening that the preceding sentences might seem to require, he writes the sentence that is the whole of his philosophy of love. "I know what the world has done to my brother, and how narrowly he has survived it, and I know, which is much worse, and this is the crime of which I accuse my country in my countrymen, and for which neither I nor time nor history will ever forgive them, that they have destroyed and are destroying hundreds of thousands of lives and do not know it and do not want to know it. And I know which is much worse. The knowing is worse than the doing. The refusal to see, the comfortable, convenient, carefully maintained not knowing of a country that has preferred its self-image to its self-knowledge, this is the thing Baldwin spent his entire life arguing against. Not because the argument would win, because nothing can be changed until it is faced. There is a conversation Baldwin had in 1965, a debate at Cambridge University against the conservative commentator William F. Buckley, Jr., that I want to stay with, not because of what was said exactly, but because of what happened in the room. Baldwin spoke first. He was given the question, "Has the American dream been achieved at the expense of the American Negro?" And he answered it, quietly, precisely, with the complete and unhurried authority of a man who had been thinking about nothing else for 40 years, in a way that left the room, which had not come expecting to be moved, completely still. He described what the American dream looked like from the position of the people who had built it and been excluded from it. He described the specific texture of what it meant to grow up in Harlem, knowing that the country's story about itself did not include you, and understanding, young before you had the language for it, that the gap between the story and the reality was something you were expected to manage with your silence. He spoke for about 20 minutes, without notes, with the precision of someone who has been composing this argument in every essay and novel and conversation and sleepless night for his entire adult life. The Cambridge audience, British, largely white, largely not the audience Baldwin had been writing for, gave him a standing ovation, voted in his favor by a margin of more than 5-1.
Not because he had made them comfortable, because he had made them see. And the seeing, the specific, involuntary, completely undeniable seeing that great writing and great speaking produce, is the only precondition for change that Baldwin believed was real. Now the bridge. Because James Baldwin was writing about a specific country, a specific history, a specific set of injustices that are not evenly distributed across the audience watching this, but what he was doing, the act he was performing across every essay and letter and interview, the philosophical position he was holding in the face of every pressure to hold a different one, is not specific to the subject he was writing about. He was practicing the most difficult form of love available to a human being, the love that sees clearly, that does not protect itself from what the seeing reveals, that does not trade the accuracy of the image for the comfort of the relationship, that says, I love this enough to tell you what I actually see, even when what I see is painful, even when the seeing makes the room uncomfortable, even when the honest account is harder to deliver and harder to receive than the comfortable one. Most of us have a version of this in our lives. A country, yes, but also a family, a workplace, a community, a relationship, a version of ourselves that we have been seeing at a comfortable distance, rather than with the full, unsparing, genuinely loving clarity that Baldwin brought to everything he looked at. The comfortable not knowing that is easier than the seeing. The careful management of what gets said and what stays unsaid in the service of a peace that is not actually peace, but the accumulated cost paid in silence of everything that has not been faced. Baldwin's argument, made across 40 years in a body of work that has not diminished with time, is that the comfortable not knowing is not kindness. It is the crime, and the seeing, however painful, however unlikely to produce immediate change, is the love. Here is what James Baldwin asks of you, practically, today. First, face the thing you have been not facing. Not the country, or not only the country, the thing in your immediate life that you have been seeing at a comfortable distance. The relationship where the honest account has been withheld because the withholding felt like kindness. The version of yourself that you have been not looking at directly because the direct looking would require a change you have not yet decided to make. Name it. In Baldwin's language, precise, unsparing, without the softening that makes the naming feel safe but renders it useless. Not everything that is faced can be changed, but you do not yet know which things can and which cannot until you have looked at them directly enough to find out. Second, practice loving what you see clearly. Baldwin's love for America was inseparable from his refusal to lie about it, was constituted by the refusal, was, in fact, the refusal. The evidence that he cared enough about what the country could be to say precisely what it was. Identify one relationship with a person, a community, an institution where your love has been accompanied by a not saying,
where the honest account has been withheld in the name of preserving something that the not saying is actually slowly corroding. Say the thing, not with cruelty. Baldwin was never cruel, was precise in the way that precludes cruelty, because precision leaves no room for the performance of anger. With the specific, caring, completely adult conviction that the person or community or institution you love is worth the truth. Third, read Baldwin directly. Not about Baldwin, not the summary or the analysis or the secondary account of what he said and why it matters. The essays themselves, which are, without qualification, the finest prose written in American English in the 20th century. Notes of a Native Son, The Fire Next Time, No Name in the Street, the essay called Stranger in the Village, in which Baldwin describes being the first black man ever seen in a Swiss mountain town, and uses that experience to illuminate the whole of Western civilization's relationship to the people it has decided are other, with a clarity and a compassion and a lack of bitterness that is, given what he is describing, one of the most extraordinary literary achievements I know. Read one essay this week, slowly, in Baldwin's own words. Let the precision of the seeing instruct your own. Fourth, stay in the country. Baldwin came back from Paris in 1957. Could have stayed, could have built the expatriate life that the distance made possible, the life that was, in some ways, more comfortable than what he returned to. He came back because the love required it, because the project, the specific, costly, never-finished project of trying to close the gap between what America promised and what it delivered, required the presence of the people who could see it clearly enough to keep naming what needed to change. Whatever your country is, your actual community, your family, your workplace, the institution or relationship or version of yourself that you have been considering abandoning because the gap between what it promised and what it is has become too painful to keep facing, consider staying, not in the mode of comfortable acceptance, in the mode of Baldwin, clear-eyed, present, telling the truth because the truth is what love actually requires.
I want to close with a letter. Not the famous one, not the letter to the nephew in The Fire Next Time, though that letter is its own complete world. A letter Baldwin wrote in 1979 from his home in the south of France to his friend and fellow writer Toni Morrison. He is 55 years old. He has been writing for 30 years. The civil rights movement has crested and broken and left behind a country that is different from what it was and not yet what it needs to be. He is tired. The letters from this period carry a fatigue that the earlier work does not. The specific exhaustion of a person who has been looking clearly and speaking honestly for 3 decades and has not yet seen the change that the seeing and the speaking were supposed to produce. And he writes to Morrison not with despair, not with the bitterness that would be entirely understandable, with the specific, durable, completely adult version of hope that is the only kind Baldwin ever trafficked in. He writes about the work, about the necessity of continuing, about the writers coming after them, Morrison herself and the others who would carry forward the project that neither of them would live to see completed. He writes, "Not everything is lost. Responsibility cannot be lost. It can only be abdicated. If one refuses abdication, one begins. If one refuses abdication, one begins. Not if one succeeds, not if one sees the change one was working for, not if the country closes the gap between its promise and its reality on any particular timeline. If one refuses to stop looking, refuses to stop speaking, refuses the comfortable not knowing and the strategic silence and the abdication of the seeing that is the only thing that makes change possible at all." One begins, again, as Baldwin began, every morning, with the clear eyes and the love that does not lie.
Here is the question James Baldwin leaves us with today. Not from safety, not from the comfortable distance that makes the seeing easier, from the specific authority of a man who came back from Paris, from exile, from the distance that had made the seeing possible, because the love required his presence. What are you not facing in your country, in your community, in your most important relationships, in the mirror, that your love for it requires you to face? Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. Leave that in the comments, because that answer, your Baldwin answer, honest and unsparing and given in love, is not a small thing. It is the letter written to the nephew who needed to know that someone saw him clearly and loved him anyway. I'll see you in the next one.